When you go to the grocery store, there are dozens of food labels that don't mean what they say. Grass-fed, cage-free, natural, local, all of these frustratingly vague. But king of all labels is that USDA organic stamp of approval that guarantees that you're getting something on which no chemicals were sprayed so that you can safely and confidently consume it without risk of slowly poisoning yourself. Well, in this video, I'm gonna burst a few bubbles when it comes to what organic really means and how far it really has to go. But don't worry, because I'll also be walking you through some really practical solutions, 3 of them, that are gonna help you reduce the toxic load in the foods that you eat. And spoiler number 3 has a little bit something to do with growing your own food. But before we go any further, welcome back to the channel if you're new here. I'm Taylor, and I help gardeners grow in more sustainable and regenerative and sure, organic ways. And if you'd like to get free gardening insights that will help you build your garden in such a way that eliminates the need for toxic and harmful practices sent straight to your inbox, you can sign up for my email newsletter by hitting the link in the description or scanning the code on the screen. Now, before we go much further, we got to define a few things because, as I alluded to before, a lot of labels don't really mean anything, or at least they might not mean what you think they do. There are rules about what words companies can legally put on their foods and what that has to mean. And just looking at something as simple as chicken eggs might help us out a little bit here. The labels cage-free, free-range, and pasture-raised are labels that refer to the living conditions of the chicken who laid the egg. Cage-free means that the chicken isn't living in a cage. It doesn't mean that it ever gets to see the light of day. Free range means that technically the chicken had access to the outdoors, specifically a 10 square foot patch of outdoor soil per hen. Pasture raised means that the chickens were raised on pasture once they left their brooder. But none of those technically tells us about the chicken's diet. Vegetarian fed is a common label that means that the chickens weren't fed anything but grains and greens. But as you definitely know, if you've raised chickens, chickens are omnivores. So vegetarian fed isn't necessarily a good thing. Non-GMO means that the grains that it was fed aren't genetically modified, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they were organic. All organic foods are non-GMO, but not all non-GMO foods are organic. Corn and soy free means that the hens weren't fed corn and soy as a part of their diet, which matters because of the way that the chickens store and metabolize linoleic acid. So chickens who are fed corn and soy aren't able to synthesize the linoleic acid, so it accumulates in their fat stores, making its way into the eggs that it lays. And in case you're unaware of linoleic acid, this is a high omega-6 fatty acid that has largely fallen out of favor in health circles. It's one of the driving reasons that seed oils are considered unhealthy. It's not likely something that you want in your eggs. So the ideal set of labels for a package of eggs read pasture-raised, corn and soy-free, organic. My rule of thumb when it comes to labels is if it doesn't say anything about it, assume the worst. Nothing that is USDA organic will leave that off the label. No egg company is just gonna spend extra money to raise their birds on pasture and not tell you about it. The point of defining the labels here is just to say that you have to know what they mean and you have to know what they're not saying. And that brings us to organic. Now, when it comes to fruits and veggies, which we'll be spending the rest of our time mostly looking at, it gets a lot simpler. It's just conventional or organic. And if you shop at the grocery store, you can know that something is organic either because it's labeled as such or because the code on the fruit or the veggie is a 5-digit code starting with a 9. A food that is certified USDA organic means that the product is required to be grown without synthetic pesticides, genetic modification, synthetic fertilizers, or herbicides. And in the field in which these crops are grown, it has to have been free of those things for the past 3 years. Organic is a bit of a frustrating label because it puts me in a place where I apparently either have to buy something that is toxic that fits my food budget a bit better, or I have to spend a little bit more, in some cases double the conventional price, to get it clean. What I've come to realize, however, is that the issue is not actually that we're being forced to buy healthier food at a super high price. It's that we're able to buy some food at a really low cost, and we should probably be asking why. But without going too much down that rabbit hole, there are still some big issues with organic. First of all, conventional and organic crop fields are often planted directly adjacent to each other or very nearby, sometimes being owned by the same farmer. You might have seen agricultural planes or crop dusters flying over the fields and spraying their crops with fertilizers, herbicides, and pesticides. Well, imagine that this spray bottle is the crop duster and this small fan is a windy day. If you spray your conventional crop field on a windy day, what happens to your adjacent organic crop field? This phenomenon is called pesticide or herbicide drift, and unfortunately it's more common than you think it is. In fact, many common organic pasta and cereal brands that contain wheat and oats have been found to have glyphosate residue in them. You can check out the articles linked in the description for more information. Glyphosate or Roundup is one of the most common, maybe the most common herbicide used in the 21st century, and it's widely considered carcinogenic and detrimental to human and soil health. So it's really a bummer learning that because of how much it's used, it finds its way into even certified organic crop fields. If only we had someone with a position of power, a seat of authority, who would speak out against the dangers of glyphosate, demand a nationwide reduction in its use, and then make the company that produces and sells it fully liable for the harms that it's caused consumers so that we can get it off our shelves and out of our foods. Back to organic. The other main gripe that I have with the organic label is that while hypothetically the conditions of the soil and ecology are going to be better by using organic growing techniques, the organic certification doesn't suggest that any real effort was actually made to regenerate and build soil. And the reason that this is frustrating is because there's so many known ways to do this, and the problem of losing our topsoil, losing soil biology, is so big that we can't really afford to just be using organic fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides, all while tilling the field every year and calling it good. Damage has been done and is being done to the earth, and we need to start working toward healing it. Now, this is not a condemning of organic farmers or conventional farmers. I think that these are some of the most important people in our society. And we're also losing farmers faster than we're replacing them, at least in the US. I get it that farming is a rigorous operation that runs on tight margins and tight schedules, but a lot of the solutions to rebuilding our soils and restoring our ecosystems isn't gonna happen by accident, and it needs to happen now. Obviously, we're not gonna see overnight change, so in the meantime, what can we do about all this? I said that we'd look at 3 practical solutions to the problems of living in a toxic world, and the first solution is to learn what the most sprayed crops are. This list is sometimes referred to as the dirty dozen, but number 13 on the list probably isn't much better. Some crops cost a little more to buy organic because pesticides aren't used very frequently on those crops anyway. Others nearly require pesticide usage to stay alive, so those are going to run a bit more expensive. I'll leave links in the description for you to check out those lists as well. I do recommend buying organic fruits and veggies. It's not that the organic label means nothing, it just doesn't guarantee a clean product. One thing that you can do, and this is sort of a bonus, is if you can't buy something organic, you can use the baking soda trick where you make a solution out of 1 teaspoon of baking soda to 1 quart or liter of water, mix it up, and then use it to soak your fruit or veggie. Let it soak for 15 minutes or so, and then strain out the solution, and then rinse the baking soda off. This is actually a proven way to remove a large quantity of the contaminants from the exterior of your produce. Unfortunately, this doesn't work for removing the contaminants from the inside of the plant. Plants that have spent a lot of time in the soil soaking up toxins are hard to make clean. So those are the ones that I would say you want to focus on buying organic. The second solution is to research actual companies. And this applies especially for pre-packaged foods. I said before, if a company doesn't come out and say on the label that it's probably not a thing. So if it doesn't say organic, it's not organic. If it doesn't say non-GMO, it is GMO. At least you kind of have to assume. There's probably some exceptions here and there. And unfortunately, for now, more and more, you have to assume that if the company doesn't test their products, especially for grains, for glyphosate residue, it means that they likely contain some degree of contamination.
A quick added thought here was that I want to make sure to include, but I thought after we filmed, is that the exception to the rule that if it doesn't say on the label, assume the worst, would be buying directly from farmers at a farmer's market. A lot of the time it doesn't make financial sense for small scale growers to invest in organic certifications, but it doesn't mean that they are spraying chemicals. You just gotta ask, and I almost guarantee that they'll be honest with you. Just wanted to point that out.
The Jovial brand, which owns BioNatura, is a company that sells pasta, sauces, some fruits and jams as well, and they specifically test their products for glyphosate. 1 Degree Organics is a brand that sells glyphosate-free oats. Oats are a hugely affected crop when it comes to glyphosate residue. Do your research and see that the company's website says something or anything about testing for contamination, especially when it comes to your grains, your cereals, and stuff that you can't really grow as easily at home. Which leads us to practical solution number 3, and the one that chances are if you're watching this video, you're already doing. at some level, whether big or small, and that is grow more of your own food. Growing your own food is one of the most surefire ways to know exactly what went into that food that you eat. It sounds obvious because it is. It's almost like that's how people have done it for most of human history. Not saying that everyone has to grow their own food. I'm not saying that growing your own food is easy, but we need more people taking responsibility for moving us forward toward a less centralized, fully organic food system that doesn't have to rely on unsustainable practices. And the way that you can start contributing toward that is just by growing a little bit for yourself. Now, the full picture, the troubling truth of our world is that we're surrounded by environmental toxins. It's a toxic world. And unfortunately, I've heard from some of you in the comments and via emails over the years that you have contaminated soil on your property. And this is a real thing. On residential lots, there can tend to be a buildup of toxic chemicals and heavy metals in the soil because of the way that houses were built and the residue that was left over after building. And that's its own problem that needs addressing. But what can you do if you have contaminated soil? Well, if you specifically know that you have harmful pollutants in your soil, like someone informed you when you moved to your property, or it's common knowledge in your area, definitely get some testing done to establish a baseline. I'm not going to go in full depth how to clean up contaminated soil because I don't have any technical experience doing so. However, I can point you in a few directions, and honestly, this is something that we should all be seeing as incentive for growing in this way. But there's been pretty substantial research regarding microorganisms' ability to decontaminate soil. Fungi, bacteria, and algae have been shown to clean up soil contamination through something called bioremediation, and this occurs in a number of ways. Many microorganisms have been shown to neutralize heavy metals through either bioabsorption or bioaccumulation, which are basically two ways of saying they adsorb or absorb the metals onto their bodies or into their bodies, chemically treat them so as to immobilize them until they can be converted into stable forms. A little more specifically, certain microbes are able to convert excess amounts of heavy metals into insoluble mineral precipitates that become a long-term part of the soil, which essentially locks them away, making them non-toxic. They're in the soil in insoluble forms so that the plants won't be able to absorb them. And this happens on the flip side too, by the way, but with essential minerals, where sometimes essential minerals are locked up and microorganisms break them up with their organic acids that helps chelate minerals that the plants and humans actually need. All this is to say, gardening with microbes as a priority has a ton of potential for doing everything that organic growing should be optimizing for. Microbes decontaminate and regenerate soil, making food more nutrient dense and overall likely safer than mass-produced store-bought food. This might sound like a no-brainer to some of you, but this is one of the many reasons that we focus on microbes and getting the word out on so much on this channel. And I want to be super clear on this. Don't make one of the microbial brews that we talk about or some homemade compost and then expect the microbes to immediately and perfectly clean up your soil. If you know that your soil is contaminated or you have suspicions, play it safe and get testing done and look into specific strains that work on removing those toxins. Regardless of high levels of contamination or not, soil biology is sort of the missing link in the whole certified organic realm that I want to see added in. If you found this video informative, please share it with someone who you think would also find it helpful. If you enjoyed this video, you will want to watch our other video all about the soil crisis that nobody talks about. As always, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.